Hello and welcome to the next episode of When Tomorrow Comes. Some of you may have picked up on the fact that Ian looks a little bit different this week. No, I'm sure he probably will suit ginger hair, but you are correct in that he is absent, and therefore I am chairing for today. So any of the Ian groupies who have joined in are going to have to wait another week, I'm afraid. But I'm pleased to announce that we have a cracking lineup this week, joined from our very own Clara Blagden and Anna Snow. Hi both.
Hi. Hi.
And also pleased to announce our special guest of the week, Philip O'Farrell, CEO of Outernet Global, and John Hoyle, founder of Sook. So welcome to you both.
Good to be
here. So I'm right in that we're about, I think, 4 weeks now since non-essential shops have opened, coming up to 2 weeks since the pubs have let us back in. So it only seemed right that this week we looked upon the recovery of the high street, probably since we've started to come out of lockdown, but also specifically the innovation that's sort of emerging from that, that's helping to stimulate the high street. And Clara, you've sort of been looking into that, and I don't know whether you want to provide a summary of your article, and for those who haven't had a chance to read it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Charlotte. So yeah, like you say, high streets are back. Shops are now open, which is great, as are restaurants and cafes. And people are really starting to enjoy the alfresco dining, pretending that we're in Spain. And luckily, you can get a haircut, and gyms will be open shortly. So it's good news. However, despite this, and despite all the long queues that we've been seeing, it actually seems that shopper numbers have been quite below pre-lockdown levels. I think footfall was down by 63% compared to June 2019. Retail parks have been down slightly less. I think it was 34% less. So they've been a bit more resilient, and shopping centres have been affected the worst. But as a result, clearly there's been some issues for operators, and even the likes of John Lewis and Boots have announced store closures and staff cuts. So it's not too great. However, there's a number of things that the government are trying to do to address this. One being the new planning framework, which will hopefully be introduced in September. And this will offer a greater flexibility of commercial uses in order to minimise the vacant floor space. And then finally, there's a big push for businesses at the moment on high streets to be able to adapt through innovation, which is really needed from all angles. So the innovation really goes hand in hand with the flexibility to ensure a healthy high street. And I really believe that the combination of these two are critical if the high street wants to remain relevant as part of our daily lives.
Thank you, Clara. John, I'm going to come to you first for my first question. I guess the phrase of sort of the death of the high street, it's been around for a while now, and your project sort of looked at how to combat some of those issues before lockdown, looking at retail space sort of on a short and flexible time basis. But I guess what viewers might want to know more about is how COVID in particular is impacting the high street and some of the issues that have come out of that specifically, rather than what we necessarily had there before. And I'm also interested because how I read your concept of Sook is that it's obviously shared spaces, which in this sort of time is quite difficult. And I wondered if you've had any feedback from landlords and previous tenants and how you can cope with that going forward.
Okay. Well, certainly the corona's had a kind of transformational effect on what we're trying to do in a very positive way, other than obviously we've had to be closed like everyone else. But it's definitely increased the demand for solutions that sit outside the normal comfort level of surveyors and asset managers in particular, who normally have to deliver to pretty rigid kind of risk profiles when they're looking for income. So that's a bonus for us. Empty space is obviously an opportunity for our product, and they will have increased dramatically after Corona as well. In terms of kind of the immediate impact, I mean, it's very hard to say. I mean, I can tell you anecdotally that the footfall outside our Cambridge unit is actually above pre-Corona, immediately before Corona levels. So our March count is registering higher, but the breakdown between male and female has been completely turned on its head. So the footfall was predominantly male in March, and in the last couple of weeks, it's been 3-to-1 female. I don't know what that means, but it's kind of interesting. And I suppose the biggest change is the attitudinal shift. Like the way that we have approached physical retail for 50 years has been exposed as being kind of absurd in many different ways. And so, and it's taken a shock like this to shake the system that has grown around kind of accepted norms to its core. And that is an opportunity for all of us, I think, to rebuild models that work for a new world that we're approaching, you know, rapidly. Much bigger emphasis on localism. We're about to open a shop on just off Oxford Street, but actually we think that our business will be much more suited to provincial town centres than central London locations, and it'll be really interesting to see. I think that change. I don't know how it's going to play out, and our model's designed to work everywhere. But I think localism is going to be a really important factor. To your final question about interactivity, so our spaces are not shared at the same time. You have complete control of a Sook demise when you're occupying it, and they are clean, obviously, with various measures in place to prevent infection. But what is also kind of really important is that all of our spaces are completely interactive with the device that you have in your pocket or handbag or wherever you carry. So you can completely interact with our spaces without having to engage with another human being or touch anything that isn't already yours. And that is a pretty good way of maintaining a relatively personal, sterile environment, which is really important in a sort of post-lockdown world.
Great, and I think that kind of leads me quite nicely into Philip when you talk about that interactive element, because Philip, you've just received another planning permission, obviously at the hands of our own Anna Snow, to contribute towards your immersive project, and it'd be quite useful for you to explain what that is for the viewers. But also, I think Clara touched on it, obviously, in terms of planning policy. The policy sort of is looking towards creating more experiences, so shopping areas, big shopping streets like Oxford Street, not just being necessarily there for shopping, but you go there for a half day. Obviously, at the moment, it's a big effort for people to go to somewhere like Oxford Street in the current environment, and I feel that the mix of uses and experiences is actually what's going to draw us to those spaces.
Sure. So I suppose two things. Firstly, just on the planning side, I'm by no means an expert, so thankfully we've got your going on side and some great skill to help get our message into the language of the planning authority. So thank you for that great work. I'm a TV executive by trade, 30 plus years making television shows and launching channels all around the world. And now I find myself running a new entertainment business, which is anchored in real estate. It's very unusual. The heart of what we're doing is creating entertainment and immersive experiences, and that, from my background, is how you sell product. Now, ultimately, I've been in the business of driving high footfall to retail, whether that's online or physical, through the advertising industry on television, by product placement in movies. What I was finding was that the TV industry at large, from an ad sales perspective, is going down every month. Retail was disrupted on the high street because of online, and everything was becoming a bit of a Wild West. And what we're doing with Outernet, firstly in London, is creating premium retail, but in some cases, in an atomized environment. So I'm really excited about creating this mass awareness of a product, but not having to have a full-time real estate play on a busy high street. I think that world is going to evolve. I think you're going to see different types of retailers doing more innovation, which then leads into the key point, innovation. So the ability to curate content, to drive people to feel emotionally connected with the product through virtual try-ons, through bringing together sort of the wisdom of crowds when you do launches of products so that everyone wants to be there. Technology is at the heart of that process, and that sort of journey begins in the marketing asset, creating a data flow, and then very graciously, I suppose the word is extracting little bits of data as people pass through a district in our case. So there's lots of different retailers doing different things, but also there's going to be entertainment that drives people to certain products. So I think being smart around, I suppose the word is atomizing the retail experience in very high footfall areas is the business we're in, as well as obviously a massive advertising and entertainment business. But the retail element is about creating storytelling, engagement, and then using innovation to drive sales.
I think that's, if I can chip in there, what's quite interesting about the Outernet Global and where this got to. I mean, we started working on this project back in 2008. So, and at that time, where we've got to now was in no way what we envisaged we were going to end up with. And it just shows that need for innovation and for responsiveness, and to take that opportunity and to identify trends and use that to help guide through planning. And part of the problem with planning is that it's like an ocean liner, isn't it? Like they spot something ahead and it takes about 4 years for the boat to move to get there, and by then it's changed again. What we've been really lucky with on this, I think, speaking personally, and you know, it's a thanks to Camden Council really, is we've had really engaged officers and politicians at every level who understood the concept of what we were trying to do here. And we've really benefited from the fact that this isn't just Outernet, this is all around Denmark Street and Tin Pan Alley. So it was always focused on retail, and it was focused on that specialist music retail, which was failing. It was failing dreadfully because of the internet, and people weren't going to guitar shops anymore. They were ordering and things coming in, and it was a real problem. So that was always the core of what we sought to do. And then everything else evolved from that. And then where we've ended up with is this absolutely fantastic, immersive experience, really. You know, first, I can't think of anything particularly comparable to it. And this will then be spread around the world. So it will not only link us in the local communities, but it will enable people to link virtually across New York, London, I think looking at Los Angeles as well. So it's so much more, as Philip and Chloe say, so much more than just retail now. It has to be constantly changing, has to be constantly engaging. We are spoilt now with technology. You can never see someone just sat staring peacefully into space. Everyone's on a phone. Everyone is constantly wanting information, and that's what we need to move towards, and to try and keep that current and to respond in that way. And you know, I think Clara's article very much picks up on that as well, and obviously what John and Philip are talking about. It's really, really key.
And just building on Anna's point around the foresight, I guess, of the planning people involved in our particular scheme, and also, you know, getting support of Amy LeMay and also Sadiq's office around what we're doing, which is really, you know, steeped in cultural history within a key part of the city, where we're investing in restoration of what were, you know, very, you know, long-standing music retail units, very traditional, and then overlaying the most advanced, innovative, entertainment-based, effectively sales machine that helps curate an amazing experience for anyone that passes through the environment. And because we're enhancing the area so greatly, it's going to, all the halo effect for everyone around is going to be staggering. So that's what I think we're going to be judged on in the future, as we've actually delivered on what we've said from a planning perspective. I think everyone involved in the project will be proud of the renovation and historical sort of amplification of what was arguably could have been a dying space, and partly blighted by Crossrail leaving, rather than leaving you know, a trail of problems behind. We're actually leveraging that, launching new entertainment venues, launching new retail. And I just think it's, you know, it's been a team effort. And I think, like I say, Camden, in my experience running MTV channels, where we've had, you know, we had a head office in Camden, we always enjoyed a great relationship there around culture and music. And then when you blend that with retail, I think it's going to be a sweet spot.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And I know obviously Clara picked up in her article about sort of the different positions of different boroughs and the likes. And John, I don't know, obviously you've come, since you've got one unit obviously in Cambridge, you're obviously looking now into London. But I don't know, from when you're looking at retail units and where you want them to be placed, whether you do look to certain boroughs which obviously have that innovative way of thinking, or whether you actually look at the technologies that are available in the immediate area. I don't know how things like the importance of a high street being smart ready means to you, if it's 5G ready, and those sort of things, if that plays into some of your decision making.
No, it doesn't. So, you know, my background is coming at it from a real estate angle, and so I think a healthy dose of cynicism when selecting sites is the best way to approach stuff. The Sook model is based around operating within A1 use and whatever the rules of the local game are, because part of the problem that the high street has been suffering from is that various different stakeholders are completely inflexible. So we built a business model that's designed to operate within kind of the rules of the game. And it doesn't matter to us what's going on necessarily. I mean, of course, site selection takes into account all sorts of different factors, but the idea is that we can serve a Stevenage as well as we could serve Shoreditch, because we can cater for the different people in a different way. It's a model that's rooted in affordability, that can, you know, rent that space at £10 an hour in a low value retail hour and £300 an hour in a high value retail hour, and cater using the utility of shops on a time basis to generate revenue consistently across the week, but at appropriate levels for those people who might want to use them at different times. I think it's one of the things that no one has really considered with retail for a long time, is that not all hours have the same value. And that's why having a shop that does the same thing 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for a decade makes no sense. We want to create a canvas that allows all sorts of people to rotate through that space and drive financial sustainability in that way.
It seems you've chosen your guests well, because we're fully aligned on the same premise, in that, you know, I'm running our business in the same way as I'd run a TV channel. I've got different times of day where the audiences in my world are completely different. So from a retail perspective, there is no sense in holding that space for the full amount of time, unless you want to attract, you know, a very broad audience, and certain products don't need that. And being able to almost schedule or program to that audience, or those shoppers in this case, is definitely the future of retail.
I think that's what I find really exciting about the urban gallery as we know it, but where the immersive screens are going to be. So if we did some draft programming way back in 2012 when we were submitting the planning application originally, and just looking at things like when Wimbledon happens, so you're displaying Wimbledon, but then the sports brands that go with that, how they can then have virtual kind of pop-ups, and how you can do virtual try-ons, and how you can program across so many different ways, linking the retail to the sport, to an exhibition downstairs, to displays, and that's got to be the future. And as I say, that's the flexibility. People aren't necessarily interested in tennis for the other 50 weeks of the year, but for those 2 weeks, what a great opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is really why the flexibility is key. And hopefully the changes that the government are suggesting will come in September, because it just does give the retailers and landlords that flexibility to switch between the uses. I mean, everything is just merging. And I think over the next 10 years, it will do more and more. So online is merging into physical, physical is merging into online. We've got restaurants doing takeaway service, and we've got shops doing all sorts of different things, selling food and drink. So yeah, that flexibility is key.
I'm gonna fire questions back at both Clara and Anna to sort of finish up and round up. If I say in one sentence, it doesn't have to be one sentence, but from your experiences that both of you have had, obviously Anna most recently, and Clara from all your research, if you could have one sort of form of innovation in the planning system right now to help get more of these technologies through on the high street, is there anything in particular that you'd want to see which the government aren't already doing?
I would like, I don't know how to do that. I think people need to stop being scared of technology, and whether that's education, whether it is just coming from looking at these new things coming forward. But the problem we faced with getting this through, and we've always battled, is just the lack of understanding of what modern advertising is. It's not Piccadilly Circus, you know, back in the 80s. It's not blinding lights. It's not Coca-Cola rammed down your throat. And it's changed. Things have changed. And I think until that message really filters down to the decision makers, which, you know, if we look at the demographic of the decision makers, are probably maybe the hardest ones to get to understand of what this future is. So for me, that would be is education, maybe education for the decision makers on what the benefits of a new form of retail would be.
I think for me, it's just really trying to encourage as many high streets and town centres to become smart, as you call it, as much as possible. They're doing it in various places already. In Suffolk, they're doing it in 12 different towns. But, you know, providing free Wi-Fi to customers, you can target promotions out and you can do footfall tracking and all of that. So it's not as much retailer specific, but more of like town centre wide. And then the businesses can then really use that information to understand customer needs, provide target marketing, work out when they've got quiet periods that they can give out free coffee or whatever it is. But I think doing more and more of that will really hopefully help. It'll be interesting to see in another couple of years whether it has actually helped in these towns.
Yeah, wishful thinking. Well, I say at the moment, from a sort of data point of view, the planning system is attempting to become more data driven and more reactive, and a lot of work's going on, particularly with the likes of the GLA. So hopefully we'll see some good outcomes from that soon. But yeah, in an attempt to keep this short and sweet, I'm going to round up there. And I say thank you to everyone for joining, particularly our special guests, I should say. And it's great to actually have a positive outlook on where the high street is going, especially post-lockdown, and in the context of some of the figures that are coming out now. But otherwise, I'm going to say thank you for everyone who was watching, and hopefully check in again next week.
Thank you, Charlotte.